Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
You want to put the body in an environment where there's heavy forces placed on it.
Right.
So bone density goes up, muscle density goes up, muscle size goes up, body fat storage goes down, because your body doesn't need a bunch of storage if you're not trying to go long distances. So like if you're like a sprinter, your body wants to get rid of all that shit.
Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm Brian Grin, and I'm here to give you actionable tips to get your body back to what it once was 5, 10, even 15 years ago. Each week, I'll give you an in-depth interview with a health expert from around the world to cut through the fluff and get you long-term sustainable results. This week, I interviewed author and the founder of the X3 Bar, Dr. John Jaquish. We discuss many topics such as the difference between variable resistance and lifting weights. Is cardio a waste of time? Do you need to be sore to build muscle? Dr. John's thoughts around protein, his dry fasting protocol, and his one tip to get your body back to what it once was. This is definitely an entertaining interview. This was round 2, and I really enjoyed it, and I know you will too. So thanks so much for listening and enjoy the interview. All right. Welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin, and I have Dr. Jaquish on, founder of X3 Bar and author of Weightlifting is a Waste of Time, and So is Cardio. This is part 2. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I have the book right here in case anyone wants to know what it looks like. So when you search for it, just look for the red cover and the Wall Street Journal bestseller emblem.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. This is I like when I get invited back to a podcast, because that probably means I did something good the first time. You know, it's like podcast people, they're like media people. They're never going to tell you you did a terrible podcast. So they say, everyone says, oh, it was great. It was awesome podcast. It was one of my favorite ones.
Right.
But then when you get invited back, you're like, oh, okay. So they must have meant that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah.
Well, I invite people back. Either I've enjoyed the interview or I really enjoy your product, and it was both. But I got to say,
Nice.
the product has been a game changer for me, and I've actually implemented into my program with my clients. So every client that I get that I work with, that's like part of the program. So
yeah,
yes, big fan. Well, I figured we start. Not everyone listening probably knows the X3 Bar. Why don't we talk about the X3 Bar and the difference between that and, lifting regular weights? So that would be obviously the difference between variable resistance and normal weightlifting, just so people have an idea. Yeah.
So variable resistance is changing the resistance as you move. And what I did is I invented a medical device a little over 10 years ago that treats osteoporosis. It's the most effective treatment for osteoporosis the world has ever seen. Beats every drug that's ever been clinically trialed. And it had to do with bone compression. So you compress a bone from end to end. So I'm pushing away from myself. It's this end to this end of the humerus and compressing that bone. And so that's what the clinical trial was on. And I noticed that we're loading the bone only in the positions where people absorb high impact forces. I watch these postmenopausal females who have never exercised, not even once in their life. And after 6 months of using the medical device, they're using 6, 7, 8, 9 times their body weight.
Yeah.
Now, professional weightlifters can't do that. But now they're only using it in a very small range of motion. But a lot of the doctors, like some of the doctors at the hospital, this was done in London. So the British National Health Services participated, so the government healthcare system. And the physicians that were in the test group, so some of the test subjects were actually physicians at the hospital. And they said, like, well, how does this compare to what people normally lift? Because they weren't, like, one of the things that was a prerequisite to this study was that nobody ever had lifted weights before, because it's more like the normal population, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially in that age category. Like some of them were like, yeah, yeah, I was in dance when I was like in high school. You're talking about like a 60-year-old woman, and you're like, yeah, okay, that's fine. You're not having any lingering effects from that. So what they were asking was like, how, like, these weights are so high, and I didn't see that as a problem. And I think some of them were very leery. Like they're putting hundreds of pounds through their hip joint, and they're like, can I break something here? And so I had to give them the research answer. Never my opinion when you're talking about somebody's safety. It's like, what do we know from the literature? So, from the literature, impact is dangerous, but we're not doing impact. We're taking the positions you normally absorb impact in and loading the body with slow and controlled resistance that is self-applied. So sort of like you can't squeeze your own fist hard enough to break a finger. You have a process called neural inhibition, which shuts you off before you can do that. So it's just a safety mechanism. And we have safety mechanisms in the body. So instead of designing a computer system that tried to guess what people could tolerate and what people can't, because all of those have been a catastrophic failure thus far, I just thought, okay, let's do it by comfort. If people are comfortable to create more force, well, then good. They can continue to create more force. If they're not, then they stop automatically based on their own neural inhibitory process. So as people were going through this process, they were seeing these tremendous forces. And so I came to understand something, like, immediately as I'm having this conversation. People who normally lift, beginners put 1.3 times their body weight through their lower extremities. Advanced lifters, for however the American College of Sports Medicine determines what an advanced lifter is, because everyone wants to argue this point, it's 1.53 times their body weight.
And you're talking just normal weightlifting for lower extremities, 1.5.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's like the top 1% of the strongest people who have participated in the NAIMS database, which is a sample of 20,000 people. It was 20,000 at the time. It grows about 2,000 a year. Okay. So now, I mean, like, drug enhanced athletes are not part of that consideration. Sure. Obviously, if you are enhanced, they ask you not to participate in the survey. Sure. Because what good would that do? We know something about somebody who's not like anybody else because they take 50 times the amount of testosterone a human should normally have. Like, we're not going to learn anything from that person. So yeah, they're disqualified from the testing. So what we found out is the strongest people are putting 1.53 times their body weight through their lower extremities, but the minimum amount of force that is required to trigger the hip joint to grow, both sides of the hip joint, both the pelvis and the femur, is 4.2 multiples of body weight. That's the minimum. So if people go to the gym and they lift 1.53 and they need 4.2, they're not stimulating any bone growth at all. And so where do high loads come from? So obviously we built bone from somewhere, right? You and I as little kids, somehow our bone density showed up. How did that happen? Well, it happened when we were children. And children absorb very high impact forces. So running, jumping off of furniture, jumping out of trees. Right. That all kids do it. In fact, little kids, when they run, they pound their heels on the ground. They sound like elephants. They might only weigh 60 pounds, but pounding their heels on the ground as they run. And so like, part of it is like, well, why do you do that? Like, God, these kids are so annoying. Well, they don't know why they're doing it, but they're doing it to build bone density. That's normal. And then as we get older and become heavier, heel striking is something we stop doing, and we begin to get on the balls of our feet, toe strike. And you get a lot more agility when you do that as an adult. Like a sprinter, their heels barely touch the ground. Their toe strike, and then they fire right off that same toe. Right. So the loading dynamics as we age are very interesting, but we can still have the same adaptation that little kids have in building bone at any given time in our lives just as long as we absorb the proper amount of force. And so when I started looking at how to get the proper amount of force and design the machines and then tested them at this clinical trial, I thought, wow, like humans are 7 times stronger. I did the calculation. 7 times stronger in the impact ready range of motion than they are in the weaker range of motion.
Right.
Which, when you think about that, that really means weightlifting sucks as a stimulus for growing muscle. Because where the muscle is most capable, which is, out here in the stronger range of motion,
which is almost, just so people not watching, which is almost full extension, right? If you're talking about
just shy of full extension of the arms or legs,
right? That's when you're strongest, and your weakest is, if you're talking about chest press, would be right at the bottom, where you're just trying to get the weight off
where
your
the bars land on your chest, right. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm not exactly. Some podcasts is like everybody watches on video. Some it's more of an audio thing.
Right.
When looking at this data, like I thought, wow, like I'm the only one that's really looking at how brutally bad weightlifting is as a stimulus. Now, we've had studies on variable resistance already.
Right.
So, like putting bands on bars and stuff like that. But with the data I had, I thought, okay, if you have a test group that has them lifting weights and they get, sort of an expected result, which is very little strength gain over, let's say, 6 months, and then you have weights and variance, and that second group has a huge gain in strength. What's the more important variable, weights or variance?
Variance.
Obviously, right? I mean, as simple as that is, I would say 99% of the people who comment on the internet are not smart enough to understand that right there. So it's kind of interesting. Is first, I was proving it with science, and that wasn't enough for most people because they can't understand the science. They're just not intelligent. So what I then had to do was explain it via examples. So, we had testimonials of people, and then if somebody's like, well, it's not possible to gain, X amount of muscle, like if people putting on 20 pounds of muscle in 6 months, well, it's not possible to do that unless you're on steroids or something like that. And it's just like, okay, it is possible if you're training in the most optimized way, which X3 users are, and you are not. So if you've never seen 20 pounds of growth, I don't care. It's irrelevant because you're not training the same way. So, and once I start framing the argument like that, they'd be like, okay, let me read that book. And then they'd read the book, and it was like, the book was a huge shift for us. Because it was like, oh, I didn't understand that this has all been documented. And I take all those studies. There's 16 studies that show variable resistance is grossly superior to standard resistance. And there's even one of those studies that says the higher the ratio from top to bottom, so the more extreme the variance, the greater the muscular gain, both size and strength. And so I took it to the furthest degree possible. So when I'm holding X at the bottom of a chest press and 5X at the top.
Right. Yeah. And you know what?
Or right around there.
For someone that's been lifting for 20 years or so, and I started using it, about a year and a half ago, I definitely could tell a major difference. And also too, joint integrity. I used to have some knee pain, some elbow pain from lifting.
Sure.
I mean, I have not experienced that at all. And I've increased my load from just going up in the bands as I've progressed throughout it. And so that's another one. You want to comment on the joint integrity and just helping just sustain that throughout the years.
Yeah. That's a mystery for a lot of people who train with bands, and then they see X3 and they're like, oh, I already trained with bands.
Right.
And they just think bands is X3. It's sort of like a tire in a car. It's the same thing, right? Right. Well, it's not the same thing. So the problem with a band is you throw a band around your back and you go to do a push-up with a band behind your back, and your wrists end up twisting outwardly, And you could break a wrist doing that, or you'll cause extreme pain in your wrist and you won't be able to train for a week or two, or maybe you'll cause a chronic injury, so you'll never be able to really train correctly again. And I've seen guys do this. They take an X3 band and then they use it incorrectly outside of the venue of the product.
Right.
And then they hurt their joints. So like using X3 protects your joints. Using bands destroys your joints. So it's in the right context. So I snap anybody's head off whenever they're like, oh, I love your bands. And I'm like, yeah, it's not bands.
Right. That's one component. There's also a ground plate, right? And then there's
a bar, right? Because we got to protect
bar.
the ankles too, right? So there's the Olympic bar, and there's a plate you stand on, and the thing is, like I was talking to somebody earlier today who's a pilot, and he's like, well, I don't really have room in my bag to bring the ground plate, so is it really that bad if I don't bring the ground plate? I'm like, I don't know. You want to break an ankle, or you want to half-ass all your workouts so you're training so light they don't do anything?
Right.
Which one?
Yeah, no, and you can only
figure it out. Like either you'll figure it out or you'll make an excuse. One of the two.
Right. And you can there are a few exercises you don't need the ground plate for, but 80% of them or whatever you do.
Yeah.
You do need the ground plate. So yeah, it's definitely a total system. What about you found the X3? How long have you had the X3 out for? How many years?
A little over 3 years.
God, is that it? Why did I think it was longer?
We launched our launch. It was kind of a soft launch on the Dave Asprey podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure you heard that one.
Yeah.
So Dave Asprey, he's a friend of mine, and we had talked about all kinds of research and stuff, mostly about bone density over the years. And then right when I launched this, I'm like, hey, I got something I want to talk about on your podcast. And he and I actually got together about 2 months ahead of the podcast. I went up to his house in Victoria, and where he is? Yeah, I'm not gonna tell everybody where he is. No, somewhere near Victoria. I'm not gonna put his address online.
He's
got a lot of haters, so I'm not gonna do that.
So it's been three years. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, it was a little over 3 years, and then we did a soft launch, and it's just gone great, and more people that get it. So typically, a consumer product has a return rate of 30%. So 30% of the products you ship out come right back to you, because people don't like it, they don't like the color, or they're too lazy to work out. Fitness products are actually on the worst end of consumer products, because usually people get something and then they're like, oh, this is work. I don't want to do this. And then they send it back. But what's great about X3 is people see results right away. Like they train with it the first time, and then within 2 days later, they look different and they look better. And they're like, oh, this actually works. Unlike all the other crap I've tried, this must have triggered something. So while they might not understand the science, they understand they look better in the mirror. And so we have a 1% return rate.
Wow.
Yeah. So we sold 100,000 units, and most of them are just still out there. And you rarely see one on eBay.
Right.
And obviously, like some of them end up there. Like somebody has one and they die or something. Like you get 100,000 of anybody, and somebody will drop off. So there's some things like that, but really not a big secondhand market for it. People love them.
Now, let's talk briefly maybe about, I know your book, and part of the title is talking about cardio as well, and specifically chronic cardio. Maybe speak on that and how that essentially can be a waste. Yeah.
Weightlifting is a waste of time. So is cardio. So now, if you want to be an endurance athlete, if you want to be able to run long distances or bike long distances, you for that. Oh, that don't do it if your goal is losing body fat. Because here's what cardio does. You're trying to get your body conditioned to do a lot of work with a small amount of fuel. So if the body never changed, it would just burn all the excess fuel, right?
Right.
Thermodynamics, as every idiot trainer says. I mean, they try and apply the rules and science of melting an ice cube to getting rid of body fat. That's when someone says thermodynamics, stop listening. They're just trying to sound smart and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Because when someone says, or calories in, calories out, you bullshit. That's not how it works. Like, your body is not as simple as an ice cube. And when you want to change something in the body, there's a whole system of hormones that control a whole bunch of stuff that are trying to help you be optimized for your environment. So here's the problem. You start doing cardio and your body's like, oh, we're going to go long distances with a small amount of fuel. So to optimize that, we're going to get rid of muscle, because muscle is just a big engine that's running all the time. We want a small engine.
Right.
So when you lose weight from cardio, or you're losing weight, you're losing muscle. So you're getting weaker. This is like, you see like women who do cardio, they always complain they don't have an ass, like their butt disappears.
Well, I think you can really see now the fact that the Olympics are going on and you watch track and field. I mean, would you rather look like the long distance runner or the sprinter?
Yeah, the sprinters look absolutely like statuesque.
Unbelievable. Sure.
The distance runners look like
there's your answer.
Sick.
Yeah, there's your answer right there.
Like I say, is this the COVID ward? I mean, like, just they look terrible. Why
don't we talk about? Okay, go ahead. You want to?
No. So, like, you upregulate cortisol when you do cardio.
Right.
And cortisol's job is to get rid of muscle and to preserve body fat. So your body is telling itself, we need to stay as fat as possible, as long as possible. Now, last I checked, I've never met anybody, and I've talked to thousands of people about their fitness goals. I've never met anybody that said they wanted to be weaker and fatter. Have you?
One person. No, I'm
kidding. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people that get weaker and fatter because they follow stupid advice, but nobody wants that. And so I just tell them, like, that's what cardio is going to do for you. And also the whole, like, I want to be the perfect cross-trained athlete. And so they do a ton of cardio and they do a ton of strength training, and they end up looking like a guy who's never worked out ever. And it's because all these stimuli are conflicting.
Right.
Like, you want to put the body in an environment where there's heavy forces placed on it.
Right.
So bone density goes up, muscle density goes up, muscle size goes up, body fat storage goes down, because your body doesn't need a bunch of storage if you're not trying to go long distances. So, like, if you're like a sprinter, your body wants to get rid of all that shit.
Right.
So, like, think of yourself. It's like, do I want to look like a Formula One car? The absolute leanest, the absolute most refined machine that can deliver the greatest amount of power. No regard towards distance, but just explosiveness, high power to weight ratio, that kind of thing. And so that would be much more like the Formula One car. Nobody wants to be the economy car.
Right. No one wants.
It's like
you go to rent a car, you really don't want to rent the economy car, right?
I mean, sometimes you do, because you don't care.
You want to save gas,
and you're going slow, whatever. But right, like, let me tell you, I don't drive an economy car. I think you know what I drive. I think you just saw me in it.
I did. Yes. What about the myth around muscle damage required for growth? Let's touch on that. Yeah, I knew you.
Yeah. Muscle damage is inversely related to growth. So people used to say, you like workouts, you tear the muscle and then it repairs itself and gets bigger. So oversimplification, it's false. But oversimplification is another word for wrong. And that's a perfect example of simplifying something to the point where it's just incorrect. So what happens is you can damage a muscle while you're exercising. And actually cardio athletes do it more than strength athletes.
Yeah.
Like if you look at muscle cells under a microscope of like a marathon runner, cells are destroyed.
Right. All that
And
pounding.
so
Yeah.
their protein synthesis has to do with repairing the muscle just to bring it back to where it was. In fact, lifters too, when they have damage, they have to repair the muscle to bring it back to where it was.
Right.
And if they have a really like people who like are always trying to mix it up, or what else do they say?
Like
I'm
muscle
going to shock the muscle into growth. Yeah,
like
muscle confusion.
Muscle confusion.
Yeah.
So
muscle confusion is absolute bullshit. It never existed. It's an idiotic idea. It was always an idiotic idea, and it's been disproven multiple times. So what happens is, they shock the muscle, all right. They create a lot more damage in it, and then the body is repairing the damage and never letting them grow. Right. It's only when you stop damaging the muscle and can still take the muscle to fatigue that you're triggering growth. So the last 60 pounds of muscle that I've gained, which is basically all the muscle I've gained in my life, other than during puberty, that was, I've never had soreness.
Never soreness. And I attest to that
never
too.
Even I mean, never, like sometimes like right in here, like somebody does a bench press day.
Right.
And,
right, right in the chest.
You do that to your friend. And he's like, oh, why are you doing that to me? That hurts so bad. Right. Right. And I do that to my friends who work out now. And I'm like, yeah, it's because your workout is shit. And by the way, you're still small.
Right. I attest to that. I've used the X3 for a year and a half, never been sore. I used to be sore all the time. And I've put on, over 5 pounds, over 5 pounds of muscle. And I'm actually getting a Dexa scan tomorrow. So I think it's going to be more than that. I haven't gotten one for 6 months. So
before you do the Dexa scan,
okay,
what I want you to do is to do the US Army test. And Google it. There'll be it's on like calculators.net or whatever. Okay. It's public information. And there's an equation that takes, for males, it's a neck measurement below the larynx. So this is the larynx. Mm-hmm. Your Adam's apple right here. Right. So you want to measure, so you get the top of your traps, because it's trying to determine your muscularity. Okay. It's actually easy. It's kind of right where my collar goes for the rugby shirt I'm wearing. And then your waist measurement right around your belly button.
That's the test.
And that's it. Just 2 measurements.
I could tell you.
First thing in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like literally, this is the way I think this is the way to test body fat. Also, if you go into your Dexa scan and you drink a bunch of water, like I think it's every 16 ounces is like a pound of water. Okay. So like if you drink like a liter of water, like it'll show that you gained a couple of pounds of muscle. Yeah. Or if you go in dehydrated, it'll show that you lost a couple of pounds of muscle, because a Dexa scan only determines fat versus whatever is not fat. Right. So like I took a Dexa scan once. I drank 2 16-ounce glasses of water, and it showed I gained 2 pounds of muscle in like the course of 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah. And I mean, I can sort of, you can tell, I mean, do I need a Dexa scan? I think it's just something cool to sort of track progress.
Data points are great. Sure. But you just got to know the limitations of the data collection apparatus.
Why don't we talk a little bit about protein and the sort of the anabolic window regarding consuming protein, and your just thoughts about that. I mean, obviously I know you have a fermented protein that you guys sell called Fortigen. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yep. And
that's what I'm drinking right now.
There you go. How do you base that in as far as when you drink that, and when as far as your protein intake?
So I get 1 gram per pound of body weight. Okay. In protein. Now, it turns out that once you get 1 gram per pound of body weight, you're going to natural sources. Also, like I avoid whey protein. That's garbage. Only 18% of that is usable by the body. So I see no point in
even a good quality whey.
There's no such thing.
Okay.
It's like a good quality prostitute.
Well,
what? It's garbage either way you look at it. Okay. Yeah. There's like whey 18% of it is usable by the body. And by the way, whey used to be trash. They used to just throw it in the landfill. It's a byproduct. It's a waste product of milk production. So the reason it became popular was because the price of garbage is close to free.
Sure.
And so they get all these dairies to like give the whey, which was just powder, or it was just, kind of a sludge paste that they dehydrated. And they were like, well, we were going to throw this away, but if you guys want it and you want to package it, we'll sell it to you for next to nothing. And so that's where whey came from. And that was in the 80s. It was Dan Duchesne, who was like the first one to really go like, look, this stuff is like practically free. Like, let's put it to use. Now, he knew it was garbage quality, but it was cheap. So we could package it and tell bodybuilders it's the greatest thing in the world. And because they barely know how to spell or read or write, it'll be fine. They'll just buy it. And he was right. They just bought it like fools. And, you look into whey and like how it's used by a body, only 18% of it is the proper amino acids. And then the rest of it's completely unusable. So, you drink like a whey shake and then you go to urinate and there's like foam. It looks like you're peeing beer. That's nitrogen. It's just waste product. Like all that whey just turned into waste. So when you drink 2 big shakes in a day and you think, you really got, 100 grams of protein,
right?
What you really got was 18 grams of protein, and the rest of it just goes right to you.
And your product Fortigen is a fermented protein. And how did you come about with that?
Yeah, it was a cancer treatment. And it was effectively combating muscle wasting. It's a lot more expensive than whey, but it's got to go through a fermentation process. So you get the fermentation to grow, and the bacteria, it'll grow on meat, which is where we should be getting it. We used to get it; our ancestors got it, but it'll grow in just about anything. And so anything organic.
Where do you get it from? Where do you source it from?
It's lab grown.
Okay.
I mean, in a pharmaceutical quality facility.
Got it.
Yeah. And so we grow the cultures, and then once the bacteria dies off and just the byproduct, just the fermentation byproduct is left there, it's completely clean. There's no bacteria left in it at all. And then it's the most powerful protein in the world. And I can drink, this much. This is a 32-ounce cup.
Okay.
I put 32 ounces of water,
right,
and 4 scoops of Fortigen, and that's 200 grams of protein.
And you're drinking that throughout the day?
No, it just takes me about, 45 minutes or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. What about, I know, are you still doing, obviously you're still doing carnivore?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. With fasting?
Yep.
Okay. So you're doing 1 or 2 meals a day?
Oh, so I changed my protocol a little bit. So
that's what I figure. We all change it over the years, right? You learn to adjust.
You don't learn it. Like I learned a lot from the standard fasting protocols, and
right.
As soon as somebody brings something to my attention that I could potentially learn from, I'll try it and document it, and I'll do that while I'm pulling together all of the clinical information, and then I'll kind of report back to everyone and show what I found from a research perspective and from what I observed. But
so what's your routine like now?
My new protocol, funny thing, I developed it because I thought it was easier to follow. And I've had nothing but bitching and complaining from a group of people on the internet. But also, you got to take it with a grain of salt, because it's like trolls. Like, as soon as you're successful, you have haters, and they're just driven by jealousy. Like, trolling is all about jealousy. No, nobody goes and finds like the guy that got last place in the Olympia, or the baseball team that never made it to the playoffs, and it's just like, you idiots should kill yourselves. Like, no one says that. Like, the losers are ignored. It's the winners people chase after with hate comments. Babe Ruth said the loudest boos would come from the cheat seats. No, poor people. They're losers and they're angry about being losers. So they got to take it out on the baseball players in front of them. So, they had that figured out back then. Babe Ruth figured it out. And he wasn't a scientist. He was just able to use his eyes. So, how did I get on this?
Well, you were telling me, yeah. See, you were telling me about what you're eating and fasting routine.
Oh yeah. And oh my God, I have so many haters from this shit. Okay, so I was like, I want to come up with a dietary program where maybe I can bring some carbs back in and use them for beneficial reasons. Now there's two ways you can use carbohydrates that aren't completely stupid and just making you fat. One is replenishing muscle glycogen after a resistance training workout.
Okay.
The other one is while you are doing endurance training. Okay. So if I had the misfortune of having to run a marathon,
right?
I've done triathlons before.
Okay.
I mean, even though I knew they were completely damaging my body, just so I could, I did it. I tried it. That way, like I also tried veganism. So when somebody's like, "Well, you've never done this," I have actually.
Right.
So I want to be able to say that. So tried these things, and what I noticed.
So you added back in carbs. What type of carbs did you add in?
So, well, it's more complicated than that. I needed to create a situation where the body would become very depleted, because the biggest thing, I actually just did a poll on the extra users group, and tens of thousands of people participated. Because we have 30,000 members in the extra users group, and so you're in there.
Well, right? I should be at the top. No.
Yeah, you should. Well, we should promote this podcast in there because 30,000 people.
Yeah.
And they're also fanatical. In fact, there's this Mandalorian thing where sometimes I tell people not to deviate from the program because, don't make up your own shit. A lot of thought and science went into the right way to do it.
Right.
And then, I just said, because I like the Mandalorian, I just said, this is the way. And then there'll be like 10 guys that are like, this is the way. This is the way. And then everybody started calling my fans a cult. It's like, no, they're just quoting a TV show, but
right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if there's going to be a cult following, people should follow X3, like
that's
cult
not
members, because it's awesome and it works. Anyway, right. So what I ended up doing is I wanted to make something easy that people would actually follow. It's sort of like, what's the best diet? I mean, we could debate about that all day, but the ultimate answer is the one people will follow. You can say carnivore and people won't do it.
Right.
You can say intermittent fasting and people won't do that either.
Sure.
So, like the most Googled thing in nutrition, and I did an analysis with Google Analytics.
Let me guess.
Go ahead.
Keto.
No. It's how to lose weight without changing my diet.
Oh, well, I'm not surprised.
Right. It's like, okay, if you're obese and you got that way by eating the way you eat, why would you ever imagine there was a way you could continue eating in the way that made you obese and all of a sudden you not be obese?
Well, everyone wants the magic pill. Why would you
think that?
Yeah, everyone wants the magic pill. So,
well, there is no magic pill. And if you understand how physiology works, if you're shoveling garbage into the system,
right,
the body can't do it. Like if you give the wrong building blocks, it can't build anything. Go to a construction site and say, I'm going to take away all your wood and cement and just going to give you nails.
Right.
Build a house out of that.
You need a strong foundation. So what did you learn? What did you come up with?
So what I tried to do was there was a couple of things. I thought, okay, how do I amplify the need for carbohydrates? how do I make it so we deplete more muscle glycogen?
Right.
Well, there was one way I could think about doing it. And then you could get away with having more glycogen, or more reason for your body to make glycogen out of glucose. So it also happened to be right in line with the way I dropped the most body fat in my life, which was in high school when I wrestled. So I wrestled in high school. I was lousy at it, but I liked the conditioning. And mostly because we were dry fasting all the time. So no water, no food.
Right.
And what happens when you have no water and no food? How does your body get water?
Probably takes it from its own.
Well,
muscle.
it takes it. You're 90% there.
Okay.
It takes it from the only tissue in your body that's not vascular. There's only one kind, it's body fat.
Right.
So it pulls water out of body fat. And when enough water gets pulled out of a fat cell, it destroys itself. That's permanent weight loss, or more permanent than just using the energy that's in a fat cell that can be replenished the next time you eat. So, because the problem with a lot of fat cells is they do this and then they do this and they do this and then they do this. It's like, where are you? Nowhere. That's where you are. So
dry fasting.
I'm dry fasting. So what I've been doing.
Okay.
And another thing I noticed, these big changes with like refeeding days and stuff like that, which is really just, like somebody's word for like a cheat day.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is when you're like sugar is as addictive as cocaine.
Right.
And there's 2 studies on this, 2 really good studies. It fits all the properties of an addictive drug. Doesn't do the damage as quickly as cocaine. Like cocaine will screw your heart up with one use. Like it'll give you cardiac damage. It'll give you arterial damage too. So really not a fan of that. But sugar's not nearly as bad, but it has the same addictive properties.
Sure.
Like we want it, we think about it all the time.
Right.
And the more you have it, the more you want it. So when people are like, well, what do you do for a cheat day? I'm like, do alcoholics get cheat days? You know anybody that's an alcoholic? It's just like, yeah, hey, tomorrow's Sunday, so I get to do a bunch of heroin tomorrow. Like nobody says that.
Right.
Like that's crazy. It's like you have a sickness. It's an addiction. If you have a problem with nutritional control, the last thing you want to do is feed the process that makes you out of control. So just, like either limit or completely get rid of that stuff.
Sure.
But with dry fasting, you need in your hydration window. So what I do is I go 20 hours with no food, no water.
Okay.
Then when I get to the 4 hours, when I have to resynthesize glycogen, rehydrate, and eat, well, now a carbohydrate is a benefit. And so this is also part of like the hyperplasia protocol. So you burn up your muscle glycogen when you're exercising, but you want to shove as much glycogen back in as you're recovering. So I eat my 40 grams of glucose tablets before my workout. So like as I'm working out, it's just ramming back in there and I'm getting like a pump like crazy. And I'm rehydrating during this. And so I can have more water and that 40 grams, but then I can have a little bit, I can have about half my body weight. And there was a study I was waiting for, which was a meta-analysis on this. So putting a bunch of research studies together that was just published a couple months ago. I knew this was coming. So I was like, I can't wait to see what they found. And what they found was exactly what I thought they'd find, which was you can take about half your body weight in pounds, in grams of carbohydrates, and you won't be able to store body fat with that at all. It just goes right back into muscle glycogen. And you can do so in an 8-hour window. I choose to do it in a 4-hour window.
Okay. So you're doing a 20-hour dry fast.
Right.
Every day. And then you have a 4-hour window there. and you said you were doing 40 grams of glucose tablets.
Right.
So putting that in your water when you're sort of, and then you're working.
No, I just chew the tablets.
Chew the tablets. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you do your workout.
Mm-hmm.
And then you sort of
Then I have dinner. Yeah.
Eat a normal dinner. And that normal dinner is just carnivore or you
meat. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
At least 90% meat. So meat. Yeah, I mean, there can be some other carbohydrates in there.
Right.
Now I'm kind of picky about the carbohydrates. Like I like rice because it doesn't make you crazy and want like
white
chocolate,
rice,
everything. Yeah, like white rice is fine.
Not a lot of like anti-nutrients in there.
Right. Like I like Indian food. So there's like the heavy cream, and the sauce, which is fine, and then the meat, which is fine, and then there's rice.
Okay. Interesting. So the dry fast, I mean, I just put a disclaimer. I would work your way into something like a dry fast, right? I mean, this is something that evolved over time, and you did normal.
Yeah,
fasting.
Do a 48-hour water fast first,
right?
But and also like a dry fast, okay. Here's why I do this 7 days a week, and I do not deviate. Because one thing I've noticed that's a problem with fasting, with carnivore, with all kinds of flexible dieting programs is you're making a massive change to the amount of calories you're taking in, which impacts the amount of water you can hold. I mean, even protein is like 2 grams of water per gram of protein. Mm-hmm. So you're really screwing with your hydration. And when people go through these phases, and I think I blame bodybuilding for this because in preparation to a contest, there's a lot of periodization of different types of nutrition. Mm-hmm. So they like go 0 carbohydrate for a couple months and then just get lean as hell. And then they go back to like, I don't know, it's like 300, 400 grams of carbohydrates a day to try and get the muscles just swell with glycogen. And, you'd think because that's readily available energy, your body would just feel great in that period of time. Like you're just supercharged. Every bodybuilder tells me they feel like absolute garbage. The worst feeling they've ever had. Just like they're sick. They're like, do I have the flu? What's wrong with me? And here's the problem. Your body's always looking for homeostasis. And you're screwing with that so hard when you make these massive changes. And so what I'm trying to do is build a program that you can just do every day and not think about. And then you don't have headaches. You don't have diarrhea. You don't feel ill. I feel fantastic all day, every day.
Yeah.
Because I eat the 1 meal a day. I have my Fortigen at the same time. My hydration has peaks and valleys, but only on a 24-hour scale, which gives me dry fasted benefits. So I'm burning more body fat. And I'm going to do this. And I'm also eating at a deficit. So yes, I mean, like people were noticing like my face is getting leaner. Everything's getting leaner. There's more veins sticking out of me. And, for those watching on video, you can see that I'm very vascular. So like all these things, I'll do this until I run out of body fat to lose. And people always ask me that question. Well, what's going to happen when you're just out of body fat to burn? And I'm like,
well,
I get that question a lot, but I've never met a person who had that problem.
Yeah, I was going to say
never once.
What was the biggest differences between just doing your normal fasting and the dry fasting? What would you say the biggest differences you found?
Oh, so some estimate that you burn body fat 3 times faster with dry fasting. There's no real way to prove that.
Right.
That's just people who are in the fasting lifestyle and sort of the science of fasting that have made those observations. So I really wish they weren't out there like espousing that, because there's no way to measure it and it makes them look like frauds.
Now, what about your personal experience? What did you feel different?
Yeah, it's right about there.
What's that?
I mean, they're not wrong through experience, but there's just not a good way to measure it. Also, because in like Dexa scan is like the gold standard of body composition. But the problem is when you're dehydrated, your Dexa scan looks like you're losing muscle like crazy, but you're not.
Mm-hmm.
So
Did you find did you find you were different mentally, or did you find it was difficult to do in the beginning?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, mental focus. So for me, it was not difficult at all.
Okay.
Like I knew, so I have an advantage over normal people who try this. I understand it scientifically with great proficiency first. So no matter what I feel, I know what's actually happening. Now, that's not how most people approach problems. They're told to do something and they try it and they're like, well, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we'll see how this goes. And, all of a sudden they like have a hiccup, literally, and they're like, uh-oh, something's not right. I should probably eat a pizza.
Hmm.
Like that's how most people behave. But the more that I write about this, the more I talk about it, the more podcasts I'm on, the more people are going to go, okay, yeah. I mean, like I tried that. I screwed it up. I'm going to do it right this time.
Okay. So you didn't,
Yeah.
So it didn't take you that long to get used to it. Interesting.
Not
okay.
at all. No. In fact, now that I've done dry fasting, I will never not dry fast.
Wow.
I will never do. Now, also, so like once a month, I like doing a 72-hour fast to completely regenerate my white blood cells, my T cells. I do it dry. So no liquid, 3 days, no food, 3 days.
Interesting.
It's really weird. Nothing bad happens. Just feel absolutely fantastic.
One last point I wanted to touch on, growth hormone increase. Can you explain, that with the X3 and how that can trigger that?
So the only meta-analysis I have ever performed and will ever perform, because they suck to write. Like, because those who don't know what a meta-analysis is, you take all studies on one subject, and you have to be very careful with the inclusion and exclusion criteria of what studies you want to look, because that can bias your result. Like a lot of nutritional meta-analyses, like if you look at the inclusion and exclusion criteria and then you look at the funding source and it was like Nabisco, you're like, oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
See what you did there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And or Nabisco also funds a lot of like institutes of nutrition.
Right.
Solely. So,
Right. Yeah. Whenever you see a study, you got to see who's funding it. So what was the big,
Yeah. So I did this meta-analysis, but I didn't have any bias in my inclusion and exclusion criteria.
Okay.
What I did was I looked at studies that destabilize the body, usually with whole body vibration. And so that's a consistent stimuli, making the body unstable.
Right.
And what did that do with the blood work that was done pre and post? And what did that do pre and post 6 months? What did it do pre and post 10 minutes later? Like what was the result? Ultimately, in every study, growth hormone went up massively, especially those that added load with the stability firing. So if I stand on one leg and bend my knee, there is stability firing.
Right.
But if I stand on one leg and bend my knee and I'm on an X3 and I'm holding a bar across my shoulders that's got 200 pounds on it and I'm doing a one-legged squat, my growth hormone's going through the roof.
So instability along with load.
Instability plus loading. Yeah.
Is that why you came out with that vibration plate?
That's right. Right. Because to further amplify the effect. Now, X3 does it on its own.
Right.
But when you do X3 under vibration, then it's a tremendous stimulus.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I was curious about that. Well, yeah, this was this was good. Some new stuff from the last time we talked. Yeah, this is great. I'll end with one last question. I asked you the last time, which was like 7 months ago. What would you give one tip to an individual, maybe in their 40s and 50s and 60s, that wanted to get their body back to what it once was, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago? What would you give that one tip you'd give that person?
I'd tell them to read my book, which I didn't have 7 months ago. Or did I? No.
You did.
It might have been
You might have just,
yeah.
I was gonna say, I think it was just out because I remember.
Because I think it was like September when the book came out.
Okay.
So yeah, that makes sense.
There you go.
Yeah. Just like I put all the answers in the book, and I've never met a person that actually read the book that wasn't a raving fan. Now, there's people who buy the book and don't know what's in it and don't read it and bitch about it. But or my favorite criticism, it's just a commercial for his products. And I'm like, okay, I described the rationale,
right?
But I didn't put like a discount code in there,
right?
Like, I don't know. Like, books are written about subjects that often involve people going out and buying stuff. So that's just life.
Right. No, there's plenty of science, and you get into nutrition. There's plenty of other things, and
there's 250 scientific references in there,
right.
And it's a 265-page book.
Well, Dr. Jaquish, this was fun.
Awesome. Thanks for having me again. This was good.
I appreciate it. A lot of good info, and thanks so much.
Yep.
Hey, Get Lean, Eat Clean Nation. Are you a man between the ages of 40 and 60 years old, looking to lose inches around your waist, have significantly more energy throughout the day, and gain muscle, all while minimizing the risk of injuries? Well, I'm looking for 3 to 5 people to work one-on-one with in my Fat Burner Blueprint Signature program, which I've developed by utilizing my 15 years experience in the health and fitness space. This program is designed specifically for those committed to making serious progress towards our health goals over the next 6 months. We will focus on sleep, stress, nutrition, meal timing, and building lean muscle. If this sounds like a fit for you, email me at brian@briangrin.com with the subject line Blueprint. That's brian@briangrin.com with the subject line Blueprint. Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangrin.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.